The easiest way to make a diet book popular is to find a scapegoat or a silver bullet to say there's just one thing to focus on, and then to sound really impressive by citing the scientific literature, but only citing the studies that make your argument and ignoring all of the studies that show that it's not true. And in the case of grains, you can certainly find literature about the rising concern associated with gluten sensitivity. It is a real problem. And people who are gluten sensitive, and certainly those who have celiac disease, need to avoid gluten. And if people are eating a lot of highly refined starches and added sugars, they're eating junk food made from refined flour, then those grains are a problem in their lives. But that leaves out the unbelievable evidence linking whole grain consumption with better health outcomes. And this is shown not only in intervention studies, and it is shown in intervention studies, but it's been shown in massive observational studies in thousands upon thousands of people, where those who routinely eat vegetables, fruits, and whole grains are compared to those who don't. And those who do, over the course of a lifetime, have 80% less heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, and dementia. So it's just not true that you get dementia if you eat grains. It's just not true. And then the biggest study of all, really, is a global assessment of all of the populations around the world that live the longest and are the healthiest. They have the least heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, dementia. It's the blue zones. And what's fascinating about the blue zone diets is they're quite diverse. So they range from a vegan diet in Loma Linda, California, to a Mediterranean diet in Crete, to an Asian diet in Okinawa, and they're different all over the world. Costa Rica is a blue zone, part of the population there. They're very, very different, but grains are a prominent feature in almost all of them. So what they have in common is real food, mostly plants, strong emphasis on grains, and the grains vary in different parts of the world. So in Asia, the grains tend to be millet and rice. In the Mediterranean, they tend to be wheat and barley. But whole grains are a prominent feature. So the argument that eating wheat is going to make us fat or eating grains is going to make us stupid, it's just wrong. And it's belied by populations of hundreds of thousands or even millions of people living in the real world who have much better health than the rest of us and have diets where whole grains play a prominent role. But what they don't have is highly processed junk food. So if we're going to throw something under the bus here, it's not whole grains. It's highly processed junk food. Yes, we should stop eating that. Well, that's a really interesting notion, and so you could make the case. Okay, we could maybe have a Stone Age diet, but then we'd be stuck with Stone Age thinking. It's possible. I suppose that's interesting, but I think there's another argument too. I'm not really opposed to the concept of the paleo diet, and yes, if you had a paleo diet, you would exclude grains. But here are the other things you would do. You certainly wouldn't smoke. You'd get plenty of sleep. You wouldn't have chronic stress. You'd be very physically active. You would eat no processed food. The only processing they had in the Stone Age was basically heat, cold, and grinding, mostly with teeth and to some extent stone implements. So, and they hunted their own food, and they gathered plant food, and most things had one ingredient. Well, okay, try that. Try hunting. So if you tell me I'm going to give up grains, but as part of an effort to eat game that I actually hunt myself and a wide variety of plant foods, and I'm going to sleep more and stress less, and I'm certainly not going to smoke, and I won't drink alcohol, okay, that may very well be good for you. I don't know that it isn't. Most people use the paleo label as an excuse to eat bacon and hot dogs. And that's just pepperoni. That's just nonsense. There was no Stone Age pepperoni, first of all. And a lot of people who claim to have the paleo diet don't do a lot of physical activity. Some do, some don't. Most of them don't avoid highly processed foods. So, again, I think the issue is in for a penny, in for a pound. If you want to try paleo, do it right. At least do it right. And then maybe it is a healthful alternative. But in modern context, we've been eating whole grains as part of the human diet for 15,000 years. And if you want reliable evidence, I think it comes not from what we think we know about what people had for breakfast 50,000 years ago, but what we know for sure about populations living in the world today. And the healthiest people living in the world today are those who include whole grains in their diet. That's just an established fact of epidemiology. Well, they did, and the blue zones do, and in the intervention studies, those who include whole grains do better than those who don't. One of the features of the paleo diet that people tend to ignore is a very high fiber intake. Even the proponents of a paleo diet who emphasize meat acknowledge that our Stone Age intake of fiber was very high. Well, you know, I'd like to ask people who are going to exclude grains from their diet, where is all that fiber going to come from? Right? Our ancestors got it from a wide variety of wild plant foods. Where are you going to get it? Now, frankly, we don't get enough fiber in our diets even when we do include grains, but there's just no hope of including a healthy dose of fiber in our diets if we exclude grains. So we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and that's just a mistake. And you know, I can also note that I practice what I preach. Whole grains have always been a feature of my diet and my family's diet, and I eat very little of highly refined grains. Much prefer whole grains. And I don't eat any highly processed junk, and I think that's the formula. But it is, so whether the advocates of paleo eating acknowledge that insects probably figured prominently in it or not, one of the important things to note is you cannot have a true Stone Age diet, because our Stone Age ancestors ate mammoth. It's extinct. You know, a lot of the animals they ate are extinct. We're here, exactly. So it's not a relevant question anymore. We want to know something about our biological adaptation, something about our native diet, absolutely. But then the relevant question now is, what do we know about how to eat optimally in the world as it is? The other thing that's crucial is there are 7 billion of us on the planet, more. We can't all be hunter-gatherers. It just won't work. You know, back in the day when people were hunter-gatherers, there were a lot less people. They had a lot more space. It just won't work. So, you know, it's really critical to think about the big picture. What is a diet that's optimal for people? What is a diet that's sustainable for the planet? There aren't going to be any healthy people if we don't have a planet to call home, right? So that's an important consideration, too. So I've been using that list, feet, forks, fingers. I call them the master levers of medical destiny, and this traces its origins back to a very famous paper published in 1993, so more than 20 years ago, in the Journal of the American Medical Association, entitled Actual Causes of Death in the United States. And the two authors of that paper, Bill Foege and Mike McGinnis, pointed out that, you know, although we often say what's killing people is heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, what we really want to know is what's causing those. What are the factors that cause the diseases that cause the premature deaths? And they came up with a list of 10 factors that accounted for almost all of the premature deaths in the United States, and this is true around the world. And that list was overwhelmingly dominated by the first three. And the first three were tobacco, that's fingers, dietary pattern, that's forks, and physical activity, that's feet. So I say, I put it in a different order, feet, forks, and fingers. And actually, if you cut forward through time, we smoke a lot less in the United States now. So actually, at this point, the combination of bad diet and lack of physical activity, or bad use of feet and forks, is responsible for more chronic disease and premature death than smoking. But, you know, essentially, we could eliminate 80% of all premature death and chronic disease if we made good use every day of our feet, physical activity, forks, good diets, and fingers, no smoking.